Nobody expected this to be that kind of night. Not from a fifth-round quarterback. Not from a rookie who wasn't even supposed to be part of the long-term conversation. And definitely not from a Browns season that already felt like it was slipping quietly into irrelevance. But then the game started, and within minutes, something felt off in the best possible way. Throws were arriving on time. Decisions were sharp. There was no panic, no hesitation, no wide-eyed rookie energy. Just control. The kind that makes you stop scrolling, lean forward, and ask yourself a dangerous question. How did everyone miss this? Because this wasn't a fluky drive or a lucky quarter. This was sustained, confident quarterback play, unfolding in real time against an actual NFL defense, under real pressure, with nothing around him screaming ideal situation. And yet, play after play, Shedeur Sanders looked like the calmest person in the building. While everything else around him felt unstable, he was steady. While expectations were low, his execution was high. And while the Browns were technically losing the game, something far more important was happening right in front of everyone watching. Here's where it gets uncomfortable for the league. Performances like this aren't supposed to come from players drafted that late. They're not supposed to rewrite narratives overnight. They're not supposed to force analysts, fans, and front offices to quietly revisit their draft boards and ask what went wrong. But that's exactly what this felt like. A moment that didn't fit the script. A game that didn't match the labels that had been attached to him since draft day. And the longer it went on, the harder it became to explain away. What made it even stranger was who was watching. Shedeur Sanders, sitting in the stands, not reacting like a hype man or a celebrity dad, but like someone who already knew what was coming. Because this wasn't just about proving critics wrong or having a nice rookie showing. This was about something bigger, a statement game disguised as a loss, a reminder that draft position doesn't define readiness, and a warning shot to an organization that spent decades searching for stability at the most important position in football. The scary part for Cleveland isn't what Shedeur Sanders did that night, it's what it now forces them to confront. Because once a quarterback shows this level of composure, once he flashes leadership, command, and confidence when nothing else is going right, you can't unsee it. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. The question isn't whether the performance was real anymore. The question is whether the Browns are ready for what it means if it was. By the time the night was over, it was clear this wasn't just another interesting rookie appearance that would quietly fade into box score trivia. This was the kind of performance that forces a conversation, whether teams want to have it or not. Shedeur Sanders stepped onto the field with limited expectations and walked off having delivered one of the most eye-opening quarterback outings of the entire season. Not because the Browns won, and not because everything around him worked, but because he thrived in conditions that usually expose young quarterbacks instead of elevating them. The numbers alone were enough to make people double-check what they were seeing. 364 passing yards, 3 touchdowns through the air, 1 more on the ground. Clean football, no reckless giveaways, and all of it coming from a rookie who wasn't drafted to be the face of a franchise or rushed into the spotlight. These weren't padded stat lines built in garbage time or a defensive breakdown that gifted him easy throws.
Were real drives, real reads, real pressure. The kind of environment where most young quarterbacks shrink or start forcing plays just to survive. What stood out wasn't just production, but how controlled it felt. Sanders didn't look like someone scrambling to take advantage of a rare opportunity. He looked like someone who had been preparing for this exact moment all along. His timing was sharp. His ball placement was deliberate. When the pocket collapsed, he didn't panic. When coverage tightened, he didn't guess. He processed, adjusted, and delivered. That level of composure isn't common, especially for someone making their first real impression in the league. And maybe that's why this game landed so differently. Cleveland has seen good games from quarterbacks before. They've seen flashes, hot starts, even brief stretches of hope. But this didn't feel like a flash. It felt like a quarterback running an offense, not surviving in one. Every series built on the last. Every adjustment made sense. Even when the defense failed him and the score stayed out of reach, Sanders never pressed. He stayed within himself, kept the offense moving, and quietly took control of the game in a way the scoreboard didn't fully reflect. That's when the conversation shifted, not from fans hyping a moment, but from people asking serious questions. How often does a fifth-round rookie walk into chaos and look like the most stable part of the entire operation? How often does a quarterback perform at that level without the safety net of a dominant run game, elite protection, or a lead to protect? The answer is almost never, and that's why this night didn't end when the final whistle blew. Because once a quarterback shows he can operate like this under pressure, expectations change instantly. Labels fall apart, excuses disappear, and what started as a low-stakes appearance suddenly becomes a measuring stick for everything that comes next. For Shedeur Sanders, this wasn't just a debut. It was the moment the league had to stop pretending he was just another name on the depth chart. To understand why this performance hit so hard, you have to rewind to draft weekend, when Shedeur Sanders' name didn't come with urgency, excitement, or debate. It came quietly, late, long after the cameras stopped hovering and the talking heads had moved on to the next storyline. By the time he was selected in the 5th round, the narrative around him had already been written for him. Developmental, backup potential, legacy name. A quarterback teams could stash without pressure or expectation. That kind of treatment doesn't just lower expectations, it defines how opportunities are handed out. Late-round quarterbacks aren't developed with urgency. They're not given the benefit of patience. They're expected to wait quietly, learn slowly, and be ready only if something goes wrong. And for Sanders, that's exactly where he was placed. On the edge of relevance, on the fringes of the plan. A name on the roster, not the future of the position.
What made it worse was how easily his story got flattened into a headline. Deion Sanders' son, Coach Prime's kid. The bloodline angle overshadowed everything else. His preparation, his football IQ, his consistency, all of it got buried under assumptions, as if being raised around elite football somehow made his success less earned instead of more intentional. It was easier to frame him as a curiosity than to seriously evaluate what he could become. So when the season began, there was no rush to see him. No clamor from fans demanding snaps, no pressure from the media pushing for a change. He was supposed to sit, observe, and maybe get a look down the line if circumstances forced it. And that's exactly what happened. Not because the team believed he was ready, but because they eventually had no other choice. That's what made the moment so jarring. This wasn't a player who had been groomed for a debut. This was someone who had been overlooked, boxed in by draft status, and quietly waiting while expectations hovered near zero. And when the opportunity finally arrived, instead of playing small, he played free, like someone with nothing to protect and everything to prove. And that's when the entire draft day narrative began to unravel. What turned this from a great story into an uncomfortable one was who stood on the other sideline. Because this game didn't exist in a vacuum, it came with a built-in comparison the league couldn't ignore. Across the field was Cam Ward, the quarterback everyone did believe in, the top selection, the player front offices would have tanked seasons to land, the one labeled ready, safe, and built for Sundays before ever taking a snap. And when the game unfolded, the contrast was impossible to miss. This isn't about tearing anyone down, it's about what happened between the lines. While one quarterback looked like he was managing expectations, the other was commanding the moment. Sanders was decisive, Ward looked tentative. Sanders took what the defense gave him and punished mistakes. Ward struggled to find rhythm. One played like the game slowed down for him, the other looked like he was still speeding up. And the difference wasn't subtle, it was visible on every key down, every 3rd and long, every moment where the offense needed a steady hand. That's what made it sting. Draft order is supposed to mean something, especially at quarterback. Teams convince themselves it does. They invest millions, stake careers, and build entire narratives around those picks. And then a 5th rounder walks into the same stadium and executes at a higher level, without the hype, without the safety net, without the assumption that he's supposed to succeed. It flips the script in real time, and there's no easy way to explain it away. The symbolism was loud even if no one said it out loud. the overlooked quarterback outplaying the anointed one, the so-called project looking more prepared than the supposed sure thing. And suddenly, the conversation wasn't just about one good performance. It became a referendum on how the league evaluates quarterbacks in the first place, on how often traits get mistaken for readiness, on how confidence, processing, and composure are harder to measure than arm strength and measurables. What made Sanders' night resonate even more was how natural it looked. He wasn't forcing hero throws to prove a point. He wasn't chasing a comparison. He was simply playing the game in front of him and doing it better, while Cam Ward faced the pressure of expectation. Sanders played with freedom, and that freedom translated into clarity. Clear reads, clean decisions, efficient execution. By the end of the game, it wasn't about draft slots anymore. It was about tape. And the tape didn't care where either player was selected. It showed one quarterback who looked comfortable commanding an NFL offense, and another still searching for footing. That's not how this story was supposed to go, and once that image was burned into everyone's mind, there was no undoing it. The reason this performance lingered long after the game ended had nothing to do with highlight throws or box score headlines. It was the way Shedeur Sanders handled chaos. Because this wasn't a clean, controlled environment built to protect a young quarterback. This was messy. Protection broke down. Drives stalled. The defense couldn't get off the field. Momentum swung back and forth. And through all of it, Sanders never looked rattled. That's the part people don't always know how to quantify. Poise doesn't show up neatly on a stat sheet, but you can feel it when it's there. Sanders moved through the pocket like he trusted what he was seeing. He didn't drift into pressure or bail out early. When things collapsed, he adjusted just enough to keep the play alive without turning it into chaos. No frantic scrambling, no reckless throws, just calm decisions stacked on top of each other. What made it even more striking was how intentional everything looked. He wasn't reacting late, he was anticipating. He knew where his answers were before the snap, and when the defense tried to take them away, he pivoted without hesitation. That's not typical rookie behavior, especially on a team that hasn't exactly been a model of offensive stability. Most young quarterbacks need structure to survive. Sanders created his own within the disorder. And then there was the body language. No slumped shoulders after a stalled drive, no visible frustration when protection failed or a play broke down. He stayed engaged, communicating, leading, resetting. That matters. Teammates feel it. Coaches notice it. Defenses pick up on it too. When a quarterback doesn't panic, it takes away one of the biggest advantages a defense has over a rookie. This is why the performance felt different from the dozens of promising games Cleveland fans have seen over the years. Those often came with adrenaline, improvisation, or a hot stretch that burned out quickly. This was controlled, measured, sustainable. Sanders wasn't playing outside himself. He was playing within the game, even when the game wasn't doing him any favors. That's the kind of presence teams spend years trying to find, the ability to operate when the plan falls apart, to stay composed when support disappears, to keep the offense functional even when everything else feels unstable. And when you see that from a rookie, especially one who wasn't supposed to be ready, it changes the conversation entirely. Because talent can flash, poise under chaos doesn't. It reveals itself. In Cleveland, no quarterback performance exists in isolation. Every throw, every decision, every promising moment gets weighed against decades of disappointment. The Browns' quarterback history isn't just bad, it's legendary for all the wrong reasons, a revolving door of names, styles, and supposed solutions that all ended the same way: hope followed by collapse, excitement followed by regret. And over time, fans learn to protect themselves by expecting the worst. That's why Shedeur Sanders' performance landed with such emotional weight. Browns fans have seen good games before. They've been teased by potential. They've watched young quarterbacks flash just enough to spark belief, only to get swallowed by poor development, coaching instability, or a front office that never fully committed. The jersey names change, but the outcome rarely does. It's been nearly 3 decades of searching for the answer at the most important position in football. What makes this history so heavy is how often the failures weren't just about talent. Quarterbacks were rushed into action, systems changed mid-season, playbooks shifted, coaches came and went. Young players were asked to fix problems that had nothing to do with them. And when things inevitably went wrong, the quarterback took the blame and the cycle reset. Cleveland became the place where potential went to disappear. That's why this moment feels so fragile. Because when Sanders stepped into that chaos and didn't flinch, it disrupted a pattern fans know too well. Instead of becoming another overwhelmed rookie swallowed by dysfunction, he looked like the most stable part of the entire operation. And that's rare here. That's almost unheard of. For once, the quarterback wasn't the problem. He was the reason the game stayed competitive at all. There's a deep skepticism baked into this fan base for good reason. They've been burned too many times to fully buy in after one performance. But they've also seen enough football to recognize when something feels different. Not louder, not flashier, just more controlled, more grounded. And that's what made this performance unsettling in the best way. It didn't fit the curse, it challenged it. For a franchise haunted by its own history, moments like this don't come often. And when they do, they force an uncomfortable realization. The problem might not always have been the quarterback. The real question is whether Cleveland can finally break its own cycle, or if this will become just another chapter in a story fans know by heart. This is the point where the spotlight shifts, not to Shedeur Sanders, but to the Browns themselves. Because once a quarterback shows he can handle pressure, lead an offense, and stay composed when everything around him is unstable, the evaluation phase is over. The ball is no longer in his hands, it's in the organization's. And Cleveland's history makes that part uncomfortable. The opportunity here is obvious. You don't often stumble into a quarterback who looks this prepared without paying a premium for him. Sanders didn't arrive with first-round expectations or contractual handcuffs. He showed up hungry, flexible, and ready to grow. That's a gift in a league where quarterback mistakes can set a franchise back half a decade. But gifts only matter if you recognize them. And that's where Cleveland's track record starts raising red flags. Because talent alone has never been the Browns' problem. They've had it before. What's failed them is alignment. Coaching staffs that didn't trust their quarterbacks, systems that changed too often, playbooks shifted, coaches came and went, young players were asked to fix problems that had nothing to do with them. And when things inevitably went wrong, the quarterback took the blame and the cycle reset. Cleveland became the place where potential went to disappear. Quarterbacks don't fail in isolation. They fail when organizations hesitate, overcorrect, or refuse to commit. And Cleveland has gotten all three, repeatedly. This is the fork in the road. One path treats Sanders' performance like an anomaly, a nice story, something to file away while returning to familiar habits. The other path recognizes it as a foundation, something worth building around intentionally, not cautiously. That means adjusting the offense to his strengths, protecting him with smarter schemes, letting him lead instead of micromanaging every snap, and most importantly, committing before doubt creeps back in. What makes this moment so delicate is timing. Momentum in the NFL is fragile. Locker rooms feel it. Players know when a quarterback has it. They also know when an organization hesitates. If Cleveland sends mixed signals now, it risks undoing everything Sanders just established. Confidence isn't just personal, it's collective, and once it fractures, it's hard to put back together. This is where franchises separate themselves, not by finding talent, but by knowing what to do with it when it shows up unexpectedly. Sanders already did his part. He stepped into chaos and delivered clarity. Now the question is whether Cleveland will finally break its pattern, or if this opportunity will quietly slide into the long list of what-ifs that define the franchise. Once a performance like this happens, it doesn't stay local for long. Around the league, moments like these travel fast. Film gets passed around. Conversations start quietly in meeting rooms and scouting departments. And while no one rushes to crown a rookie after one game, there's no ignoring what showed up on tape. The buzz didn't come from fans alone. It came from people whose jobs depend on recognizing real quarterback play when they see it. There's already been plenty of online chatter and behind-the-scenes speculation about what this could mean. Not certainty, not declarations, but curiosity, the kind that forces teams to re-watch snaps instead of box scores. Reports and discussions suggest evaluators were less focused on the raw numbers and more on how the performance unfolded, the command, the processing speed, the calm decision-making under pressure. Those are traits teams spend years hunting for, and they don't usually show up this clearly from a late-round rookie. What really amplified the attention was the context. This wasn't a quarterback stepping into a well-oiled machine. It was a rookie elevating an offense that hadn't given much reason for optimism all season. That matters. Around the league, front offices notice when a quarterback becomes the stabilizing force instead of benefiting from one. It signals something deeper than a hot hand or a favorable matchup. There's also the uncomfortable ripple effect this creates. Every team that passed on Sanders now has to at least ask the question, not publicly, not on the record, but internally. What did we miss? Was it the evaluation, the bias toward draft pedigree, the tendency to overvalue traits over readiness? These aren't questions teams like answering, but performances like this make them unavoidable. And then there's Cleveland's situation specifically. Other teams are watching how the Browns respond just as closely as they're watching Sanders himself. If an organization hesitates or mismanages a quarterback after a showing like this, it sends a message, not just to fans, but to the rest of the league. In a quarterback-hungry NFL, patience wears thin fast. Opportunities don't stay contained forever. Right now, nothing is settled. No jobs are officially claimed, no futures are locked in, but something has shifted. The silence around Shedeur Sanders is gone. In its place is a tension, intrigue, and a growing sense that this story might be moving faster than anyone planned. And what happens next won't just define his trajectory, it will shape how the league remembers this moment. Strip away the noise, the reactions, and the immediate hype, and what this game really proved is something far more important than one stat line. It showed sustainability. This wasn't built on broken coverages or desperation throws. It was built on repeatable decisions, the kind that translate from one week to the next. Sanders didn't rely on chaos to create offense. He controlled it, and that's the difference between a moment and a foundation. Every successful play told the same story. He identified matchups quickly. He trusted his reads. He took the easy yards when they were there and pushed the ball when the defense gave him permission. There was no sense that he was chasing a highlight or forcing a narrative. He played within the structure of the game, even when the structure around him was shaky. That's a rare balance for any quarterback, let alone a rookie. This performance also separated traits from habits. Arm strength can flash and disappear. Athleticism can win early and fade when defenses adjust. But processing speed, composure, and timing are harder to disguise. Sanders showed he could manage a full game without unraveling. He stayed disciplined late. He protected the football. He didn't let frustration dictate his decisions, even as the game slipped away on the scoreboard. Those are the moments where young quarterbacks usually crack. And maybe the most telling part was what didn't happen. There was no meltdown, no forced hero ball, no sequence that screamed rookie mistake. Even when the pressure mounted, he remained consistent. That's how coaches know what they're looking at. One bad quarter can undo a lot of good. Sanders didn't give any of it back. This game also challenged one of the league's favorite assumptions, that readiness is tied to draft position, that quarterbacks need years on the bench before they can function at a high level. What Sanders showed is that preparation matters more than pedigree. When a player is mentally ahead of the curve, the transition doesn't have to be slow, it can be immediate. So no, one game doesn't guarantee a career. It doesn't promise championships or erase risk, but it does answer a critical question. Can he play at this level without everything going right? And based on what unfolded, the answer was yes. That's what makes this performance linger. not because it was loud, but because it was controlled, and control is what lasts. This is the moment where stories usually split. One path leads to commitment, clarity, and growth. The other leads back to hesitation, second-guessing, and another name quietly filed away under what could have been. For Cleveland, there's no hiding from that choice anymore. Shedeur Sanders didn't just give them a good performance, he gave them an answer. What happens next will say far more about the Browns than it ever will about him.
Because this isn't about crowning a savior after one game. It's about recognizing when a quarterback shows you the traits you can build around. Calm under pressure, command of the offense, leadership that doesn't need theatrics. Those things don't show up by accident, and they don't disappear overnight. Sanders didn't ask for patience, he earned trust, and trust is where real development begins. The danger now is overthinking it, trying to slow the moment down, convincing themselves they need to see the same thing 10 more times before committing to a direction. Cleveland has lived in that space for decades, always waiting, always hedging, always reacting instead of leading, and every time the opportunity slipped away. This time feels different, not because the hype is louder, but because the tape is clearer. If the Browns choose to lean in, this can be the foundation. Build the offense to his strengths, protect him, let him grow without constantly looking over his shoulder. Give the locker room a clear signal that this is the direction, because players respond to belief just as much as talent, and right now, belief is available if Cleveland is willing to take it. But if they hesitate, if they treat this like a fluke instead of a glimpse, history will repeat itself. Not because Sanders failed, but because the system did what it always does. And somewhere down the line, people will look back at this game and wonder how it was missed in real time. The Browns don't get many clean moments like this, a late-round quarterback stepping into chaos and bringing order, a performance that didn't need excuses or qualifiers, just football, played at a high level. This is Cleveland's moment of truth. The question isn't whether Shedeur Sanders is ready for what comes next, it's whether the Browns finally are.